All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with this week's Mechanical Engineering Research seminar. And so this week we have Dr. Prasoon Diwakar, and he's going to talk about laser and thermal plasmas as instruments for all sorts of applications. So air monitoring, mining, biomedical applications. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing this, and thanks to all of you for joining this seminar in this afternoon, and thanks to everybody who's on Zoom joining for this seminar. So today I'm going to talk about, as the title says, hot and cold plasmas, and there were some questions about the definition of hot and cold plasmas. So I'll go through that as we go in the presentation, and how we can use these plasmas for analytical instrumentation, ranging from basic analytical instrumentation as well as going to biomedical applications for therapeutics. So the plasmas on the basic, on the core, they remain the same, but then you're talking about different energies and different, and that changes the applications as well. So this is a very cool picture. I like it, and this is a picture of the plasma. And what you see is one single species. For example, this one is a calcium. This is a calcium which is glowing inside the plasma. And we were during my graduate studies, we were trying to understand how particle interacts inside the plasma. So we're tracking this particle and trying to see what's happening from point t equal to 0 in nanosecond scale. We're talking. So this is a very cool picture that's kind of represent, that's got me motivated into this kind of work, and that's why I put in the cover, just to kind of highlight what plasma looks like, but we'll talk more about that as we go along.
So what are you showing the slide? You said that's a cool picture. So what kind of temperature range are we talking about?
This temperature is about a time when the plasma started. This is about 30,000 Kelvin. So we talk about 30,000 Kelvin, but it cools down to room temperature very fast in nanosecond microsecond scale. Okay, so I've divided my talk into basically 4 sections. So introduction, I'll talk about what plasmas are. Then I'm going to talk about the physics behind it, because unless we understand the basic fundamentals, we cannot make sense of what exactly we are getting. So understand the physics behind the plasma, and mostly I'm focusing on the laser-produced plasmas, how we use lasers for creating plasma, and the physics behind it. Then I'll jump on to some analytical applications, which we use it for various instrumentations. And as you've been from chemistry, you'll appreciate some of the chemistry aspect of the analytical applications, which we get from the laser-produced plasma. And the last topic will be something which is a little new field, where we're using something called plasma for medicinal applications. And that's a different field which is coming up, which is called plasma medicine. That's more for therapeutics. So our right here in School of Mines, we have 3 of us are working on it, and actually there are a couple of graduate students who are working on this area in ME department as well. So plasmas, when we first come to mind, so plasma, what is plasma? If you search for in the Google, you will see some pictures like one of the most common, the form of the plasma, which we all know is solar plasma. The sun itself is a big, huge plasma, and it's generating a lot of energy, and other physics is also going on. But this is one of the most common, naturally occurring, the plasma which we see. The lightning which happens, that's also another form of plasma which we see on the nature. And if you want to come to define what exactly is plasma, it's basically a cocktail of ionized gases and ions and free electrons. So basically, if you think of, people say define plasma in different ways. People say the 4th state of matter, and also people also sometimes confuse with gas. So it's not gas. The main key difference between the plasmas and the gas is the presence of the ions. Free electrons and ions, whenever there is presence, it's a cocktail of that. But the presence of the free electrons and ions defined as a plasma. Going forward, this plasma has been studied for a long time, and Langmuir was one of the first ones who kind of defined plasma. He has been working in that in 1927. So he was working on mercury plasmas. He was generating electrical discharges, and he has mercury vapors, and he was looking at what emission is coming out of it and studying the physics behind it. And that's the point he defined this discharge which is happening between these electrodes as the plasma. And he borrowed that term from the biofield actually. So in biology, the blood plasma, which we all know, has been used for a long time. And sometimes when I speak, because when I speak to somebody from bio, they confuse the plasma with the blood plasma or biological plasma. So the idea was basically the concept of the plasma came from that. Just like in the blood, the plasma kind of is the major component, and it carries all the red blood cells, white blood cells to different parts of the body. So that's the main carrier. Same way when the Langmuir was thinking of, he decided that the discharge which is happening between these electrodes is act as a kind of a substrate which carries all the particles. And here the particles are the electrons, and the free are the ions, the atoms, anything which is carrying between these electrons, and we define this term as a plasma, which was not very well accepted at that point of time because blood plasma was there. So people were confusing with this, and physicists were not very excited about using that plasma. But you can see now the plasma is very commonly used. He would have not thought about plasma or TV, plasma screen, when he thought about that. But now it's becoming very in popular culture as well. Plasma, the field itself is very developed right now. But that's where the definition of the plasma came across. So it's kind of borrowed from the biological definition of blood plasma, and then but kind of now we use it for the plasma physical phenomena which happens because of the presence of electrons and ions. Okay, so the plasmas, one of the key definitions for the plasma is the presence of the ions and the electrons. And that can be generated by different ways. There are different ways you can have electrical discharge that can release some ions, and if you can produce those electrons and ions, that is also a plasma. And laser produced has plasmas also became very, very popular after the laser came into were invented. Lasers were invented about 1960, 64. And as soon as the laser came, it became a very easy source of generating electrons and ions because of the power of the laser. And so one of the first lasers which was generated, one of the first things they did was to create a plasma. So they kind of took the laser, focused onto a tiny spot, and led to multiphoton ionization and breaking down the atoms and electrons into ions and free radicals, and that was the plasma that was generated. So that has become very, very popular now. And because of the advance of the technology, the lasers have become much, much, much powerful, much smaller, and that kind of gives a lot of opportunity to create plasma. So the laser which I use, the pulse plasma which I use, one of the key requirements is a pulse laser. That means the laser energy, the energy of the photons is compressed into a very small amount of time. Most of the time we're talking about nanosecond laser or femtosecond laser, picosecond laser. That means all the photons come together at the same time, but in a very short window, 10 to minus 15 second or minus 9 seconds. And because what we're doing is we are concentrating all the energy of the photons so that it can lead to breaking of the atoms. If you take all these atoms, focus into tiny spot, and the first step happens is the multiphoton ionization. For example, if I take a laser here, shoot into the air, right now the oxygen and nitrogen, it's not easy to break the bonds. It's very difficult to break the bonds by one photon. Even if you take any laser you take, the energy of the single photon is not sufficient. And if you do E equal to h nu as c by lambda, if you know the wavelength of the photon, trying to do the energy, that energy is much, much smaller than the bond of energy of the atoms and molecules. So that's why one of the first steps is multiphoton ionization. And that's a bunch of photons, energetic photons, they combine together. So for example, we have oxygen and nitrogen. It breaks the bond. They all have to hit together at one point of time. And that's not an easy process. Having three photons coming together to hit one bond at the same time is not easy. So that's one of the challenging process. That's why you cannot have any laser to break the bond. You cannot create laser or plasma by any process. You have to have multiphoton ionization first step. Then what happens is, for example, the electron is generated. This electron is very energetic. It's moving at a very fast speed and it's bouncing and hitting other atoms in the atmosphere, other atoms. And one of them, when it hits it, that kicks out another electron. So, and it then starts the process of cascade ionization. Okay, basically, one electron will release two electrons and so forth and keep on doing. And within a moment, you will see a bunch of electrons. Eventually, what will happen is mostly complete dissociation of the molecules. All the molecules are broken down into the atoms, individual atoms, and then also electrons come out. So you get a bunch of ions in the process. And the number density to the plasma which I use, the pulse laser, the nanosecond pulse laser, I get density of charged particles of 10 over 90, which is pretty high. And the temperature can go to 40,000 or 50,000 Kelvin. But again, as I will show, this temperature, like as Nicholas, he was doing some experiments with this laser. So when we generated 40,000 Kelvin, nothing caught fire, right? You saw that, nothing was burning. And the reason is, as we're going to show that this temperature is a very short-lived phenomenon. The phenomenon is so short-lived that the heat doesn't propagate and it's not kind of melting and vaporizing everything, just very, very localized. So, but we are able to get about this temperature plasma, and that's what I define as the hot plasma. And as Peter asked before the presentation, that how do you find hot plasma? If you talk to a physicist or somebody nuclear scientist, their plasma is much, much hotter, much energetic. So they can go much higher, 1 order, 2 order, 3 order magnitude temperatures higher. And those plasmas for them, this is a cold plasma. So again, it's relative to what the plasmas which I work with, this for me is a hot plasma, and the plasma which we show later will be a cooler plasma. So now we have generated the plasma, but as a byproduct of this is, which is we want, as an engineers, we want to make use of that. So we build plasma, that's it. Okay, so good physics, cool physics is happening there, we can study all of it, but as engineers, we want to know how to make use of it. So this is the byproduct you can think of it. So you are using the plasma to break down atoms and electrons, and you're exciting all the atoms. And when they're excited, that's a short-lived phenomenon. And again, it will cool down. When the atoms or the ions cool down, they will emit light. And those light is being emitted, and we can capture that light by using some optics. And it can go to a detector, a spectrometer, we call it, and that could be used for detection of materials. So think of that as a byproduct which we're using of the laser-produced plasma for detection and sensor development techniques. So this is what it looks like. So what we're collecting the light, if you look at it, this is what we get in our computer screen. This is the wavelength on x-axis, and this is the intensity. Why it is important and how we can use this information for detection of material? Because each element has a fingerprint, signature, a spectral signature. So for example, nitrogen line should always be occurring at this point, at 492 nanometers. That is a specific emission which only will happen because of nitrogen. Carbon, for example, is happening here. Hydrogen beta line always happens here. Just by looking at that, we can tell what elements is composed of, and the intensity is proportional to the concentration. So just by looking at this signal, we can tell what exactly your sample contains, and it can also lead to identification and concentration. So we can calibrate and we can tell what exactly it contains. Another good thing you see is you can see one shot, you can get all the elements which are present. So you don't have to tune your system just for carbon or nitrogen. So in one shot, you can get a multi-element detection. So if you have a bunch of elements, 10, 20, 30 elements are there, all of them will show up at the same time. And that's very, very important because in the lab, if you go to a chemistry lab, sometimes you have to tune your system just for that species, that chemical look. You cannot look all of them at once. So that's one of the advantages of using laser-produced plasma. So previous figure which you saw here, they are all elemental lines. And the question comes, can we also use this technique, this plasma information to detect isotopes? Isotopes are traditionally detected using mass spec, so we can use separate the mass to charge ratio. And it's not very easy to detect isotopes, but there's a trick here, and I'll show that later. So this is the elemental species, for example, in this zirconia. Here, there's a different oxide. Suppose there are molecules present there, and they have different isotopic presence are there. There will be a shift. For example, you see ZRO with 90 and ZR with 91, there's a shift. This shift is very, very small. This shift, if you look at the wavelength, is the order of picometers, which is very small. The instrument cannot detect that, but if you have a good instrument and you need to have a large spectrograph, you can detect this shifts, the molecular shift, which will be different for different isotopes. And then with the same instrument, you can also detect isotope, which is very important. You can use it for forensics analysis and for lots of different analysis. You can use it for dating and all those applications. So you can look at, so that's one of the added features, that you can also look at the isotopic analysis. Now we talked about all of this, all kinds of plasmas and what signature we're looking at, but why do we care about? Why do we care laser-produced plasma? Why is it important? So when I was talking about what are the key important aspects why people want to use this technique, because it does not require sample preparation. So if you work in a lab, in a chemistry lab, or any lab you go, lots of time is consumed in preparing the sample. You take the sample, you clean it, maybe you digest it in the acid, then you send it to ICP or any instrument which you're doing. So a lot of sample preparation is needed. That means it will consume time, and suppose something is time sensitive, you cannot do it because you have to prepare the sample. And if you want to take it in the field, in the real world, you don't have time or there's no option for creating sample. This one gives you an opportunity because you don't need to prepare sample. You can shoot the laser, get the spectra right there and there. So no sample preparation required. So this is very important. Real time. The laser is about nanosecond. The whole physics which I talked about, the process happens in microsecond, millisecond. At the max happens in microsecond, millisecond. The process starts at nanosecond level and finishes in microsecond, millisecond. So you can do effectively in real-time analysis. As I mentioned, you can do multi-elemental and isotopic analysis. That means you can look for multiple elements and isotopes at the same time. This robot, the technology, that's mostly because of technological advancement. The lasers and the system have become very robust, so you can have the system packed very compactly and without alignment. Any system, every diagnostic technique you check, as soon as you get out of the lab, the alignment or whatever you're tuning, that becomes very challenging. This technique is kind of has evolved to become very robust, so you can take it out in the field, and it has become very important, which I will show you shortly. Some of the examples where people are using it. For example, you can have the laser system and you can connect, since it's an optical based system, you are sending light and collecting light. That means you don't have to, the person does not have to be there where the data. You can simply have an optical fiber which can send the light, and then light can come in, and the person can be far away. And this is very important. Suppose you don't want to be in places where it's dangerous. For example, a nuclear reactor. You want to see, or somewhere if there's a leak of some gases. You don't want to be there. So you can send the light just because it's optical phenomena, light going in, light going coming in. You can be far away and you can do the detection. Or you can also do far away distances. For example, Army has a huge laser system on a truck, and it sends the light beam far away, miles and miles, and you can still collect the light. Of course, you need a big detector. That's expensive, it's heavy, but you can do it. And suppose you want to look into something which is far away, miles away, you can still do it. So depending on the applications, you can choose what you want to do. So that provides you remote sensitivity. You can look at remote at distances, and you can do the analysis. This application, many of you might know, this is currently is happening on Mars. This is a system, looks very cool. So you can see the robot here. There's a laser lip system right here on the top, laser plasma system shooting on the surface of the Mars. And it's collecting data, and it's telling us what exactly the Mars is made of. And now, one of our students is actually analyzing this data. So we got access to all the data, about 800,000, I don't know how many spectra we have. We got access to the data, so we are analyzing all the data on different areas of Mars and trying to do some machine learning algorithms we are trying to apply. But we are working on this, the data set which we have got, which is very unique, and we can compare some of the data set which we are generating here. And this project is now been extended, and now they have added one more. They're sending one more system which has a laser plasma as well as another spectroscopy, Raman spectroscopy is being added to top of that. So this is very cool. This is already in, and the reason I show this picture, this shows that this technique can work. It's work in the extreme conditions, extreme environment, even the environment which we have no idea what it was, exactly we are going to face. It's working for starting 2013, I guess. So we are almost like 6-7 years now. So it has been long time. It's working very. We're getting lots of data from this instrument. This is another one of the researchers in Europe. They have done that. They have taken the system, the laser system, inside the water underneath the ocean, and they were looking at some shipwreck and trying to identify what it is made of, or trying to identify the source of it. So this also shows another extreme conditions. You can take the system's plasma inside the water as well. So you can do on Earth, you can do in space, you can do underneath the water, and this technique works. And again, this also again shows another extreme condition where you can apply the plasma for getting some diagnostics. This is very cool. This one, and why we are able to do this? Because the technology has evolved quite a lot. You can see the laser, which used to be size of the table when I was a graduate student, the lasers were huge. And now you can see the size has become like this tiny. And the smallest laser which I've seen right now is like almost the size of a laser pointer, which is not only small, but also powerful, because you need to have power. You can't just keep on making small, but if it doesn't do multi-photon ionization, which I talked about, it doesn't have energy, it cannot do anything. So we need to have energy. So people have been able to compress it, everything, and you can see the handheld. You can take it out in the field and do the analysis. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the physics, not too much about it, just to get an idea of what exactly is happening. So the laser plasma is temporal nature, as I mentioned. So nothing is catching fire when 40,000 Kelvin, because the plasma itself is a very time-dependent phenomenon. It happens. The laser is coming, as I mentioned, is nanosecond laser. So laser hits in this is time, this is the intensity. So laser hits here on the sample nanosecond. And then the emission, the light which is coming out, starts coming out here. By the laser ends, and then the temperature is also 40,000 Kelvin ends there. So it starts dropping down. After 40,000 Kelvin, starts dropping down very, very fast. Recombination, all the physics happens here. And then you start seeing the light. This is the light where we color. This is the light, we can see the light from here to here. And you can see within microsecond, most of the lights which we can detect kind of there, after that is very, very weak. We cannot detect it. We can still see some light. We have a nice detector. But the light is mostly in this region. The temperature, if it reaches 40,000 Kelvin, it cools down very, very fast. And so very soon it becomes about 10,000, 2,000, 10,000, and then 5,000, 2,000. Very soon becomes a room temperature. But all the physics is happening here. If you look at the physics here, the laser comes, the first is the absorption, the material has to absorb the laser wavelength, and then it generates a plasma. And then the plasma is evolving, it's moving, and when the plasma moves, it's moving at a very, very fast speed. So imagine something moving at a very fast speed, and there's an ambient gas around, atmospheric pressure, it kind of tries to stop it, so you get a shock wave. And I'll show you the shock wave. So you get a shock wave picture, which is happening, and when we do the experiment, we hear it as a noise. When you're doing the experiments, you will see a noise coming out of that, mostly because of the shock wave. And that also has some features which you can use for different applications. And this is our regime where we look at the this part where we're looking at the signal. And when plasma is cooled down a lot, then all the particles which has evaporated, all these particles start forming nanoparticles. And that is also very important because this nanoparticle, for example, if you want to develop a system where you want to generate particles for coating, pulse laser deposition, for example, this is where it's more important. So you control it here. So from this point, whatever you want to do, depending on your need and depending on your applications, you will tune your system, you will optimize the system accordingly. If my goal is just look at the signal, I'll probably look here. If my goal is to look at the particle deposition, I'll probably focus what's going on here. If my goal is just to kind of see laser interaction and then create a plasma and maybe material ablation or removal, I'll focus on this part. So this is that's what shows that plasma is very changing, it's evolving, and everything is happening very, very fast. And that dictates what you want to do. If I look at the picture of the plasma, this is how it looks like. So if I look at the picture at 0 nanosecond, then it starts moving, and everything is happening very, very fast. This is from 50 nanosecond to 140 nanosecond. And by 300 nanosecond, everything is gone. So it's very, very fast. These pictures are the pictures of the plasma, which is evolving at different pressure conditions. So just by changing the pressure, you can see the physics is changing. The plasma shape is changing, and when the shape changes, the velocity changes, the plasma reaction changes, and what you see as a signal, what you see as a particle, everything will change. So this just tells you that the physics or it's a complex process, and you have to have a very fine understanding before you interpret the data, because otherwise it's like garbage in, garbage out. You don't know what's going on, you just look at the data and you interpret, it will be totally wrong. So understanding the fundamentals is very, very important. So you have to understand, once you understand, then you can make sense of what's happening in the data. This is the picture of what happens on the material. So for example, this laser interacts with the material on one spot. This is the material which has been removed. And again, this material removal will also be dependent on the time of base properties, time of the lasers, energy and everything. But you can see, depending on what laser we choose, we can create a very fine machining. You can kind of drill small tiny hole, but this is a very small dimension. We're talking about 100 micrometers. And same thing with the depth. So, but we can do it. We can create, and this is very important. Suppose you are doing thin film analysis. You want to do it depth by depth or layer by layer. If you want to look at one monolayer versus another monolayer, you can do this analysis. This was another physical aspect of the plasma, the shock wave. So you can also picture the shock wave which is generated, and this is shock wave generated after the plasma is formed. And this is also important features. You can make use of these features. I was thinking of, has been working on this, the shock wave studies created by the plasma to identify whether the sample what it contains is explosive or not explosive. Which is also interesting because if you have the same sample, if you have sugar powder versus an explosive, do a shock wave, to put a camera, look at the shock wave, and they will have different states depending on what materials. If it is energetic, the shock wave property, the velocity, and everything will be different. That could be correlated back to identifying whether it's explosive or not. So there are, again, different applications which you can find based on that. Another thing, so I was working some time back. So plasma is made of ions and electrons, right? So they have ions and electrons are moving. So if you apply a magnetic field, you can control these ions, right? So you can control the ions and you can manipulate them. So what we were doing there some time back, we are applying magnetic field, the plasma, and we're trying to see if we can control these ions. see there was no magnetic field. The plasma is kind of evolving, expanding. You apply a magnetic field, you can see the plasma moves and stops. Kind of becomes a ball. And this is very interesting. And these are applications. For example, if you are working in a reactor, a nuclear reactor, where you have a bunch of ions, and these ions are going and bombarding on your walls and damaging it, you can control it. You can apply a magnetic field to control the plasma and stop it. Also, you can do this because you stop the plasma here, they're colliding, and that means you can probably increase the signal. So when I was looking at the signal which I showed you, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, this is a signal coming from no magnetic field. I applied a magnetic field and we can signal increase about 7 to 8 times or 10 times. So just by not changing anything in the laser, not changing anything in the system, just by introducing magnetic field, we can increase the signal. And this means we can increase our sensitivity of the system. So just by small changes, we can do that. So in the small instrument, if you have magnetic field turn on and off, you can start seeing some enhancement, which is very important. Also, you can start seeing some lines which are probably not present before. You can excite some other material, some lines. So this is kind of very important. So what I was trying to convey here, the physics, if you understand the physics of the plasma, you can make use of those concepts for better instrumentation and for better applications. So this is what the kind of summary of what the physics goes behind. And then I'm going to show you some applications which we have been doing and which we have done in the past and which we are continuing doing here. How we can take this and now we apply. As an engineer, we want to apply it. So one of the things which we, because of COVID, we see that nobody wants to sit in one place because of all the, if there is a COVID virus and we don't want to breathe the same air and just for the air quality things. Same thing, now imagine the situation is already happening when the people are working in the industry. So for example, they're making nanoparticles. These nanoparticles are flowing in and people are breathing it all the time. Or in mines, people are doing mining and then they have dust particles, they're going into your lungs and it could be toxic because they have lung cancer. So of course, they have controls, they can control, they can measure what's going on, but what happens in these areas, in hospitals, in workplaces, in your mines, they collect an average data. They collect all the samples maybe on filter. They collect on a filter for maybe 7 to 10 days, send it to a lab. After 7 to 10 days, they can respond and they say that, and saw the average out. So suppose there was a spike, suppose there was a leak of, let's say, some carbon nanotubes were leaked, which could be potentially dangerous. Now you have averaged out, the spike will not be captured. And this is an average data, it's not useful. And suppose you have to evacuate the people then and there, you can't wait for average sample. So better to have something which can do in real time. So that's what we were doing. We're doing that. Like we can use this technology to monitor all these toxic elements which are being generated in the workplace. And this could also expand it for hospitals, for example, and then for mining applications. Can we do it quickly? And can we tell exactly what is going on, where it's going on? So that's what we're trying to develop that. So we came up with a new technique. It's a electrode technique where so now the other thing is that previously we were talking about the solids. Here we are talking about air. How do you capture air? It's kind of challenging. There are air particles. You can't shoot laser in the open air and hope to get some signal. And we can get that actually. We can do that, but the amount will be hit and miss. You never know. Maybe you have to fire 10,000 shots and get one spectra. Maybe you can do that. We wanted to see whether we can get very exactly and within very quickly, not wait for a long time. So we took 2 electrodes, used the concept of the electrical field, and the electrodes are flying in. We apply some electrical voltage here. So we create some kind of field. The particles, they're tiny particles, they come in, they pick up the charge, and they get deposited on this cathode or this ground electrode. Once they are collected there, then we have a tiny laser which kind of hits these particles which we have collected. Think of an extraction. We're extracting the particles from there, and now we're generating the spectra, which, for example, we're doing with sodium. And we saw nice, and we have to run the system maybe for a few minutes or a few seconds, depending on what we're looking at, and we can get a very nice data. And this can be done in real time and it's portable. The whole system is the size of a lunchbox. And with the new lasers which are coming in, we can also have something which can be, people can, for example, miners can wear it. They can have with them while they're working and they can keep tracking what they're breathing. So this was very kind of novel and unique and collecting the air particles, and this will work with. And this was the system design, all the details there. what we were worried about, whether we can capture all the particles, what is going into the system, and we got a very nice efficiency of 90%. All the particles of different sizes, from few hundred nanometers to large particles were collected. It's always challenging to collect smaller particles because those are the ones which can be a problem because they can go into our nostrils to the lungs, and that they can cause all kinds of damages because of their large surface area ratio. So those things can be more dangerous. So we were able to catch all of them and we were able to detect very nicely what they consist of. Idea what we are planning to do here is, for example, if you have a bunch of these instruments located, let's say in our building at 5 or 6 different locations, and all the data can be generated in real time. It can go to a server and it can create a full map of what exactly is being generated, where the problem is happening. And this is much more important, especially in the hospitals, for example, or probably in the mining, very, very important, because where you can't access the people or they're far away. Having this data collected and kind of uploaded on a cloud server, for example, and then doing quick analysis then and there, and giving a full map, that will be useful. And being small, we can do that. So that's what one of our goals, my goal for the few next coming years is to generate this kind of system, which have an instrument and as well as the computational technology, kind of upload everything and get the data done. And we are developing some machine learning algorithm to do that, analyze the data quickly and identify it. So that was one of the applications which we are working on. Second application which we have been collaborating in the School of Mines and working is whether, when suppose we want to, there's a mining application. We are going to start a mine, start mining, but is it economical operation or not? Whether you really want to do the mining there or not. So before doing everything and suddenly after realizing that it's not working, probably the amount of ore or mineral which you are going to get is very, very less, it's not economical. But if you can get a first-hand information when you start the process, if you can get the quick information that it's worth it, that will be very, very useful. So we have been working on that to kind of look at, so we looked at some gold samples from South Dakota, and actually we knew which one has the rich mineral gold and which one has the not rich gold ore content, but we wanted to see if our technique can identify rich versus not rich sample of ore. So can we do that? And then we can apply our machine learning tools to kind of do it much more smartly. That's what we're working on. So we got some samples, we kind of made a small pellet kind of things, different samples. These are all different samples from gold mines in South Dakota. And we did a quick LIPS analysis. And what we're trying to see if we can classify these are the names of the samples, and using some statistical tool and some unsupervised machine learning to see if they can group it. Just looking at the spectra and grouping it. And we were very nicely able to capture all the different kinds of groupings that where they belong. For example, this is a rich gold where there's a very nice concentration of gold, while this probably one of them, I don't remember the name right now, but P was the one which has the rich gold content and this was the less gold content. So we can classify it, and now our students our mechanical engineering students are working on developing some more machine learning course, more supervised machine learning course to kind of do it very 100% with a very high success rate. We can tell whether it's whether it's a ore which we should do the mining or not. And this we are planning to extend it not only to mines but different applications. Give us any unknown sample, and we can try to classify in the group whether it's a carcinogen or not carcinogen. These kind of things which we're working on expanding it. And we are going to show some results very soon, and some students are working on that. So the main idea, the crux of it, is to get a database, for example, for the ore samples, or for carcinogens, or for the air we breathe, create a database, and then apply it, collect samples, and then do some machine learning or some kind of statistical analysis in between, and then upload everything on some cloud-based server where we can quickly analyze and quickly test what exactly is going on. So this is what long-term goal will be: to create a database, develop an algorithm, and then which can be accessed by the public in general. So that's what one of our long-term goals will be. And we are collecting a lot of data, a lot of samples. We are doing the database part, and then machine learning part, the students have started working on. So now moving on to cold plasma. So we have been talking all these plasmas. To me, they are hot plasma because we are using 40,000 Kelvin to start with, or 30,000 Kelvin. This plasma, which you see here, the picture here, which many of your colleagues, many of your students are working on right now, we call it cold atmospheric plasma. It looks like this. It looks like a pencil, like a pen. You can touch it actually. It will feel warm or hot. And it's a dielectric discharge-based plasma. So you have a dielectric field, and you create electrical discharge here, and that creates a plasma. One of the main criteria for this kind of plasma is a non-equilibrium plasma. From mechanical engineers, you will understand the equilibrium versus non-equilibrium. So if you say something system is in equilibrium, in thermal equilibrium, that means all the temperatures are the same. So you can define the system by one temperature, right? So the previous plasma which you were talking about, the entire plasma was as 1000 Kelvin. So there's no distinction between the gas temperature, ion temperature, electron temperature, all temperatures are the same. It's equilibrium. This plasma is not in equilibrium. And you want to make use of it. That means the electron temperature is 10,000 Kelvin, which is very important because that drives the reaction. You want to drive some reaction which will happen on the body or in the cells and tissues, but you don't want to be hot because you can't apply a hot system on your human body. So you don't want to fry it. So that's why. So we make use of the non-equilibrium plasma. The temperature is very hot, electron temperature, which does all the reaction, which I'll show you. But the temperature of the gas which is coming out, which is interacting with the cells and tissues, that's to the room temperature. So take this plasma and we did, I don't know whether you can read it, but it's 26.4 degrees Celsius. The tip of the plasma, the hottest part here, is about 26.4 degrees Celsius. And this, what we see, the plasma extends much further actually. We can't see because of the UV light and UV radiations and the radiation which our eyes can't see. But it extends much further. And those are very, very cold. When we expose our cells and tissues, we're exposing it here, this part, not this part. Even then, these are not very hot. So we're exposing our cells and tissues, this extended part, which is close to room temperature. And why it's important? Because those contains very reactive chemical species, which are very, very important for doing some bio reactions. Reactive oxygen nitrides, ROS, reactive oxidative species, S2O2, ozone, UV radiation, which is very important, which can potentially kill all the pathogens. So if you have any pathogens or bacteria, this can kill it right then and there. Doctors in Europe, they're only starting, if you go to a dentist, they might only start using this. They use it for cavity filling and for treatment. So doctors also in Europe, they also started using it for sanitizing the surgical equipment. So it's very important because you can see it has a mixture of all the species which are very, very helpful in killing bacteria and pathogens, which is very useful. What we have been doing is, so we have been working on how can we use this technique for something more challenging problem in the biomedical field, cancer therapeutics, for example. So, for example, this is what it generates, and what we do is, we take this is just a small graphic to show, take off this one of the cells, and cancer cell, let's say, and we apply some electrical field. So we apply electrical field to kind of manipulate the cells. So there's a technique called electroporation. So and in bio, if you have somebody knows, this is used very often for gene transfer. You can take a cell, you can apply electric field, it opens up these punctures pores or holes in the cells, which is on very temporary, short term. So, and people use it for gene transfer, transferring genes from one to the other material. What we are doing is we are doing the same technique, puncturing holes into the cells, and then to apply this ROS, where all the species onto these cells. So opens up the membrane, and then the ROS which is going in, it leads to the cell death. So cancer cell death, it leads to the death of the cells. So if you, this ROS is not a good thing for the body. It's like oxidative stress. So we don't want reactive oxidation in the body. So, but we are providing some artificial ROS inside the cells. Technically, what happens is, if you take a cancer cell, the ROS level is already high because it's working so much. The cancer cells are reproducing and it's growing fast. So a lot of ROS into the cells. Healthy cells have a less level of ROS. We're introducing a very controlled ROS into the cells, healthy cells as well as unhealthy cells. So kind of increasing the level of both of them. And the cell is designed such a way that whenever it sees that the ROS levels has reached a critical limit, it leads to apoptosis or death, cell death. So we are kind of increasing both of them. And the moment it reaches this level, the cancer cell dies, leads to that signal pathway of cell death. This one increases, and after a while, nothing happens, and then the cell has a mechanism to kind of heal itself. So healthy cells get killed out, and the cancer cells die out. Again, there's a lot of things going on. I try to explain the more simplistic way, but a lot of things are going on And we are doing is kind of manipulating those pathways so that we can kill the cancer cells and not kill the cancer cells. So this is what we have working here, and we worked on some lung cancer cells. Actually, this is prostate cancer, and we have been working on lung cancer cells here. And this is cell viability, the cell death. And using this whole plasma electroporation, we can see we are able to kill significant amount of the prostate cancer which we have. And the student Kristen Holler from mechanical and Nicole, they have been working on the lung cancer cell. And recently, we have been getting some good results, and two other students are taking forward their work. They have graduated. We're working further on this about how to take this work forward and apply and tune it more properly. And this is just a picture of how the green shows the cell activity that cells are dying. So this is process from time 0, 1 hour 45 minutes. So after 2 hours, most of the cells, the cancer cells are dead. So the green shows the green pigmentation of the fluorescence shows that the cells are dying. We're able to show that it acts very quickly. So not as against the chemotherapy, you have to keep on doing it on a regular interval of time. This can be quick, and it can be combined with different techniques. You can combine it with very small dosage of chemo and this technique and slowly work together. So more like working multiple techniques can work together for you. But it acts quick. That's one thing which I want to show you. The new project which we have started working on, so one of the graduate students is working on the type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes, of all the diabetes which happens, 95% people are type 2 diabetes. And one of the issues with diabetes is that the insulin is not produced properly. But in type 2 diabetes, even though insulin might be produced in a regular fashion, but our body kind of develops a resistance against it. So it starts reacting positively to the insulin, and it starts kind of have resisting it. And it starts, the intake of the glucose decreases, so you have more high glucose in the bloodstream. And then also leads to some kind of inflammation. Inflammation is always a complete type 2 diabetes. So there are different pathways for that. So two of our students, Katie and Taylor, they spent the COVID time understanding all the pathways. So this was a work of our mechanical engineering and biomedical student. They kind of went through and they did all the process and pathways which are happening between the cells, tissues, and the bloodstream, the insulin. All the possible pathways which are happening, and the processes which are bad ones, which we don't want, and the green ones which we want, so that we can promote, which we can have less inflammation, and we can promote that. So they were able to kind of do this, and now they are working on some modeling. So they are working on modeling parts so they can identify exactly which pathway works. And then our hypothesis is that we'll apply cold atmospheric plasma, and we are going to regulate some of these processes which are green, basically show that you can reduce inflammation. So and control these ones which increases your chances of diabetics. The immune system which is worse, and it fixes this. So they are working on, and we are going to start experiments very, very soon. So we have been working on the concept first, and then we are doing simulation, and we are going to work on the experiment and see whether by introducing the cold plasma, can we have this pro-inflammatory cytokines or the chemicals which are being released, can we shut it down and at least reduce inflammation. So that's one of the new projects which we have been working on using cold plasma. So in summary, you can see that the world of plasma is complex. I just gave a glimpse of, and for a PhD, I was just looking at one small topic, looking at different aspects. When I went to, as a postdoc and as a faculty, I'm kind of looking at different aspects. But you can see that it's a very complex phenomenon. It's not easy. But if you understand it, if you understand the complex phenomenon, you can solve various problems. So if you understand what exactly is happening, when you look at any signal, you can make a better sense. Once you understand, you can make better instrumentation. You can develop new tools. For example, plasma bio, I don't understand very clearly, but okay, I understand the plasma part very well. And with different collaborators on campus and students, we can kind of synthesize the knowledge and we can make use of this. So, but knowledge of plasma becomes very, very important, what exactly is going on. And then we have been working on some machine learning algorithms so that we can make sense of this data and they can make more smart and better instrumentation. And yeah, so rest of the things, like again, I just highlighted important understanding of the fundamentals is very, very important. And again, the work will not be possible unless the all the people who have worked with me since I came to School of Mines. So again, I thank all the graduate students who are working currently or worked before, all undergraduate students in every department and other departments in the university, all the collaborators who have helped me set up my work and go forward, and provide lab facilities sometimes, and some support for the, especially for the bio work, which I'm not well versed. So that help has been provided by all the collaborators and the funding sources. Thank you for your time, and I hope now I'm on time. But if there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Yeah, so we have about 5 minutes for questions. So if you're here in person, ask away. If you're online, unmute yourself and ask away.
I'll start because I know nothing about plasma synthesis. Okay. So when you, the closest thing in your talk to things that I'm comfortable with is the Mars rover.
Okay.
Right? Because my buddies that design and run those things. So you got one of these systems on the rover. So my question for you is, I know the biggest challenge from a mechanical system perspective on the rovers is the Martian dust, right? So when you've got this high energy laser, which is shooting out pulses to do an analysis of what is the composition of the Martian soil, how does that dust cloud affect your measurement accuracy, range, right? Because you're shooting a laser through that dust, and it's not a known atmosphere. It's not like you're on Earth where you know the constituents that you're going to hit. So how do you do that and identify your speed compactor when you don't know what's in the dust and what's between the laser and what you generate the plasma?
So that's a very fair question. That anytime you take the system out in the field, when you're sending laser beams to Mars, that can come up. The distances here is not that long, but yeah. So one of the things, again, when they were sending it, they did some testing on this dust analysis to kind of see that. But practically, so we are focusing laser, as I mentioned initially, that in order to have the plasma initiation, you need to have multiphoton ionization. You need to focus it down. So I can in order to multiphoton ionization to start, they need to a critical energy density. So I need to focus it down. So by focusing, I'm kind of dictating that I will shoot the laser onto the chair. So my focus point is there, and that's where the breakdown will happen. So anywhere in between the particles coming, the breakdown will not happen. So laser, the particles will go through. It can happen that the light can get scattered. If it's too dusty, of course, the light can get scattered, so you'll lose less intensity. But by focusing, we are controlling where you want to focus it down, and that's where the breakdown will happen. So we are controlling that way, one of the ways. Second thing is, suppose that the breakdown happened much more, or maybe the light got scattered and you are getting less light, and they interfere. The plasma which you're getting, the spectra which you're getting, you'll get the lines coming from the element, but the background emission, that will change. So if I send a laser beam which is 100 millijoule, if I send the second laser beam, which because of scattering got lost, and only 50 millijoules reached the sample, the background, all the other emissions will decrease down. And that could be, and that we can use in the algorithm to kind of reject those data sets if because of the dust particles. So taking a look at the picture overall, as the total background emission, everything was in combination, we can use that. And that's what the students have been developing this tool, kind of reject the data if the machine learning algorithm training it that something is wrong. It's not exactly, so looking at all the signal files and the background. Background contains a lot of information about the plasma itself. So I always tell students to look at the background because that tells you whether the system is running fine or not, or something happened, or light got scattered. So that's one thing. But dust definitely affects them. And so when there's a very dust storm, I don't know whether they keep collecting data or shut down. And there's a cleaning mechanism on that. But maybe just shut down. And we have access data, so we'll be taking a look at that. So it will be a good idea. I can ask my student to look at one of the dusty conditions when there was a very dust storm on the Mars, pick up the data and see what they see. So that would be a good idea. I can ask them to take a look at that data. But these are some correction mechanisms which we can exactly think of. Do you guys have any questions or comments?
So, how expensive is it to construct the laser system? You mentioned potentially using it at hospitals, but how far out are we before we?
So the laser costs have come down quite a lot. So it used to be one system will cost about the lip system will cost $40,000. So now it has come down to about, let's say one system is $10,000. So cost has come down, eventually go down there. So I'll not say that we can develop right now at this point of time. I cannot say that I can develop a system where, as an individual, we can just buy it and keep it for measuring the air quality at home. So that will not be possible at least at this point of time, maybe in future. But as an organization, for example, School of Mines decide to have a continuous monitoring system, and the organization, so those costs, I'll say like maybe $10 to $15 or $20,000. So as an organization, that could be done. As a collaborative, for example, the hospital decides to have 4 or 5 systems, that not on an individual level yet. So.
All right, so I think we're about out of time. Let's give Dr. Diwakar another round of applause.